Lieutenant Royce Williams hears a sharp crackle on his radio, pulling him from the quiet hum of his F9F Panther. More impacts reverberated through Williams' airframe, shaking the aircraft violently. The Panthers, while possessing good roll capability, were notably outclassed by the MiGs. They were outclassed in combat speed and crucial climb rate. A fourth MiG swept in, raking Williams' aircraft with 23 and 37mm shells. As this initial wave of MiGs flew by, Williams seized an opportunity. He slid in behind it, pulling the target into his crosshairs, and opened fire. Inside the MiG, Senior Lieutenant Akin felt the jolting impact, alarms blaring. He looked back to see smoke pouring from his plane and 2 Americans on his tail. He quickly dove and ran, trying to escape the deadly pursuit. Lieutenant Rowlands, seeing his chance, pursued Akin relentlessly, leaving Williams alone to confront 3 remaining MiGs pulling away. It was then, in a moment of chilling realization, that Williams noticed the markings on the receding MiG's wings, not the blue and red circles of North Korea, but the stark red star of the Soviet Union, a shocking revelation. "Cap Control, these MiGs are Soviet," he radioed, his voice betraying no fear. Simultaneously, the National Security Agency, having intercepted Soviet transmissions, they relayed the same information to the American fleet, and Williams received confirmation. He watched as the 3 MiGs climbed almost vertically, then turned for another attack. The Soviet jets were faster, their pilots skilled and experienced. Despite the profound risk of escalating the conflict, Williams knew he had no choice. He had no choice but to meet them in the deadly skies. In the MiGs, Belyakov, now leading a new assault, dove head on towards the lone American. The 3 Soviet planes roared past, firing, but incredibly no hits were scored. Williams then attempted to gain altitude when another stream of tracers erupted. This time the tracers came from the opposite direction. A new threat? It was the other 3 MiGs, bringing the total engaging Williams to 6. He broke, rolled, and dove as Soviet fighters pressed their relentless attacks. At one point, 4 MiGs flew past in formation, and Williams slipped behind them. A Soviet pilot felt a surge of apprehension as he saw the Panther on his tail. His training kicked in, he pulled sharply upwards towards the sun, leaving his flight to turn right, a risky maneuver in the battle. Williams followed, but was instantly blinded by the sun's harsh glare. Unable to aim, he broke off the chase, turning away from the sun. The moment he did, 2 more MiG flew down directly towards him. There was no time to dodge this sudden, deadly assault. Williams, with desperate resolve, turned straight into them, challenging them to adjust. He opened fire, and the lead MiG, piloted by Captain Nikolai Belyakov, veered away. But his wingman, Senior Lieutenant Alexander Vandiev, pressed on relentlessly. Tracers poured from both machines, crossing each other in the air. Williams watched enemy shells fall below him, unaware his own rounds were falling short. Yet both pilots held their triggers, locked in a deadly duel. As the distance closed, a 20mm shell struck straight into Vandiev's cockpit. Killing him instantly, the MiG stopped firing as it flew inverted beneath Williams. Another MiG flashed past, and on pure reflex, Williams fired another blast, claiming his 3rd MiG of the day, a remarkable feat in the air. Belyakov, in the lead MiG, witnessed the fall of 2 of his comrades, including his wingman. He turned back, consumed by a powerful drive to avenge his fallen men. But Williams saw him coming and prepared for the next attack. Again he turned for a head-to-head confrontation in the deadly skies. A brief exchange of fire saw chunks of metal tear from Belyakov's MiG. Williams dodged the debris as the 2 planes passed each other swiftly. He looked back and saw Belyakov's MiG diving away, out of the fight. The American Panther turned hard to chase, but another MiG screamed in from behind. It landed a devastating hit on Williams' struggling aircraft. He had taken hits before, but this lurch and sound meant profound trouble. A 37mm round struck his wing, punching clean through into the engine compartment. The impact wrecked the hydraulic systems. In an instant, his rudder flaps and ailerons were gone. Williams looked back as the midgie lingered behind him, riddling his Panther with lead. He attempted to roll, but his stomach sank as the aircraft responded with terrifying slowness. More cracks echoed through the fuselage as he desperately willed his aircraft to escape. The Panther wobbled badly, the loss of its rudder rendering it dangerously unstable. Williams was forced to handle the controls with extreme caution to avoid losing control. The pursuing MiG had no difficulty following the limping Panther through the skies. But Williams still had his elevator, a final desperate hope in the struggle. He pulled up, then pushed down, riding a desperate wave motion to gain distance. He tried to reach the safety of the clouds, still 10,000 feet below him. Bullets continued to strike his fuselage. Any one impact could be his last. His luck seemed to be finally running out in the furious engagement. Then, out of the blue, his wingman, Lieutenant Rowlands, suddenly appeared. Soaring in, Rowlands opened fire on the remaining MiG, forcing it to break off its chase. Within the relative safety of the cloud cover, Williams pulled up, leveling off at 400 feet. He had survived a grueling 6-versus-1 dogfight lasting over half an hour at full throttle. But now, he faced an equally daunting challenge: how to land his crippled plane. He tried to gauge his severely wounded machine. Its flight controls were unresponsive and imprecise. He discovered he couldn't slow below 170 knots without the plane becoming utterly uncontrollable. This was an incredibly high speed for a crucial carrier landing. He looked down at the churning sea. Ejection was clearly not an option. He would survive barely 20 minutes in the cold water, so he simply had to land. On the aircraft carrier USS Oriskany, Captain Courtney Shands received the grim report. Williams needed to land at a minimum speed of 170 knots. Shands immediately ordered preparations for a crash landing on the deck. The speed was extreme, but fortunately a full storm was raging with powerful winds. Shands, knowing the ship had to face directly into the wind for a landing, he ordered the engines to deliver maximum power for the difficult maneuver. In the air, Williams' heart raced with intense adrenaline. Everything he did with the controls felt floaty and dangerously imprecise. He teetered on the edge of disaster, moments from utter catastrophe. He mustered every ounce of skill, spotted the carrier, and lowered his landing gear. The added drag immediately affected the Panther's aerodynamics, causing it to veer off course. Williams wrestled with the controls, struggling to bring it back in line. From the bridge, Captain Shands watched intently through his binoculars. Williams was misaligned, unable to return to the flight path safely. Shands knew a go-around at that speed with such damage was impossible. Williams had to land the aircraft now, with no second chances. If the pilot couldn't align with the carrier, then the carrier would align with him. "Time to keep going, heading 96 now," Shands barked decisively. And the massive aircraft carrier began to turn towards the plane. Shands kept his eyes fixed on Williams, issuing continuous course corrections. As the barely controllable Panther barreled towards the flight deck, Williams was still crooked, but precious time was rapidly running out. The American pilot was forced to commit to his final approach. While his runway, the deck of the Oriskany, was still actively turning before him. 500 yards, 250 yards, 100 yards, 50 yards, this was it. Royce Williams, in his F9F Panther, slammed the aircraft down at 200 miles an hour. Miraculously, the third arresting cable snagged, and he was lurched forward as the wounded bird was brought to an abrupt and sudden stop. He had done it, against all impossible odds, a true survivor. After half an hour of a grueling battle against what became 6 Soviet jets, his F9F Panther had suffered 263 holes across its fuselage and its wing. So much wing damage that it was remarkable it hadn't simply snapped off. In the aftermath, a widespread effort began to contain the incident, to calm the fires of a potentially devastating conflict between two nuclear superpowers. Both sides exchanged diplomatic notes, but neither made the incident public. All records connected to this extraordinary event were classified. Gun camera footage was meticulously edited to remove Soviet roundels. Any reference in official trips to Soviet fighters was changed to enemy. Williams was awarded the Silver Star for his exceptional valor in combat. He continued his service, retiring in 1980, and never breathed a word of what truly happened that day until 50 years later, when the documents surrounding the fight were declassified. When the story eventually went public in Russia, they conceded to 3 planes lost. They claimed they were ambushed by the Americans. The US government upgraded Williams' Silver Star to a Navy Cross in 2022. There is news that in 2026 he may even be awarded the Medal of Honor. Captain Royce Williams, now 100 years old, is still alive today, a living testament to a fight that, for half a century, was hidden from history.